Hey everyone, it's Shaban. I've performed dozens of interviews and have supervised dozens of employees. So these are my top 5 red flags I look out for when I'm performing an interview on a candidate. When I say red flag, I mean deal breaker. I mean, there's a very, very good chance I'm not going to hire you. So of course there are other like little problems that can crop up in an interview, but a lot of these are going to be manageable, going to be trained up. So when I say red flags, I'm talking about things that correspond with what I consider to be deep-seated issues in the future. Okay? So as an added bonus, I'm actually going to be talking about things that I would consider not red flags that maybe someone else would consider a red flag. So here they are in no particular order. Hey, before we start, if I can just say, it's really refreshing to see how professionally you've dressed because my last boss was such a slob. I'm not impressed. I know you want to improve our relationship by maybe praising me or the company or the workplace or something like that, but really try to resist the temptation to smack talk your previous employer in the process of trying to improve our relationship. It would really, really help your chances. You see, workplace environments that are built around gossip and pettiness, that breeds distrust and defensiveness in the workplace, and it hurts cooperation. I've lived that, and it's not fun, and so that's why I look out for that red flag. The candidate talking bad about their previous employer is not always a red flag. Consider the following scenario. I see in your work experience on your resume that you worked at company X for only 2 months. Can you explain what happened there? Why did you leave only after 2 months? Oh, company X? Oh yeah, I hated working there. It was such a toxic work environment. Next question. Quitting because of an unhealthy or unacceptable work condition is totally fine, and I want to hear about it. But it's kind of a yellow flag if you throw the word like toxic work environment to describe your previous employment situation, but you don't really give any explanation whatsoever, because it really doesn't give us very much to go with. And I understand it can be kind of difficult to talk about sometimes, but there are ways to be discreet about it. So consider the following response. Yeah, company X, yeah, so that's a tough one. I remember that one. It was, I left pretty quickly because the work environment was really kind of dicey. So specifically, there were certain higher-ups there who would use kind of unfair and inappropriate measures to get workers to work kind of without pay, long hours. And one such situation, if I can just one of many examples actually, was when we had a deadline coming up, and so one of the managers said, okay, we have to stick around this weekend, we got to work the weekend. And that was kind of normal, but one of my coworkers actually had a wedding that he had to go to, and this was planned a long time in advance. He let everyone know a long time in advance. But then on Monday, as a means of shaming this worker, one of the managers had taken the chair away. And so when the worker came in and was like, where's my chair? The manager kind of just said, in really like a disrespectful way, just, chairs are for champs. So like when I heard that, it's just, I knew I needed to get out of here. So see, this kind of response is not a red flag. It's not a yellow flag. It's really no flag at all. In fact, I would consider it, for many reasons, to be a good sign, you know, good communication, good context, all that kind of stuff. So it's a very reasonable response, and so that's kind of what I would be hoping for. However, I understand that it can be difficult going into past trauma, and so for that reason, I recommend kind of rehearsing it before the interview. Figure out exactly what you're comfortable with talking about so that when we get into this kind of issue, that you know, that you keep your spirits high and that you don't inadvertently go into like a super long venting session or something like that. You certainly want to feel comfortable and keep things concise. What's the worst bug that you've ever run into, and how did you address it? Oh, I write code that actually avoids bugs, so it's never really a problem with me. Okay. Wrong answer. So when I ask this question, I don't care about the bug, and I don't care how smart you are or anything like that. I'm really caring more about the process and the attitude. Actually, there was this one bug. It wasn't my fault. It was this other engineer introduced it to the code base, and they tried for a long time trying to fix the bug. but they eventually had to give up because I jumped in and I was able to fix it in just like one lunch break. You know, at my old work, they used to call me the bug buster. Obviously, in a job interview, you're going to be praising some of your work. That's totally fine. That's expected. So, for example, this is a very common kind of question that you can expect. Okay, so go ahead and think back to the work that you've done in the past, and I want you to tell me what solution or feature that you developed are you most proud of? See, look, you've just been given the green light to brag about the stuff that you've done, so go ahead, okay? It's totally fine. And it's okay to pepper in little flexes here or there throughout the interview. That's totally expected. It's really more about how you're doing it that I'm checking for. So one of these kind of humble ways to be able to talk about something that you're proud of that you've done is something like this. Most proud of? Well, there's a few different things that I was pretty proud of. But there was this one time pretty recently I was working on an augmented reality game. I was having a little bit of trouble with kind of the hand tracking across different platforms. So I ended up creating this generalized layer that's abstracted out of my game code that handled hand tracking across the different platforms. It was a little bit trickier to implement than I thought it would be, but I'm really happy with how it came out. Happy with how it came out. It's subtle, but you can see how that's a lot more modest and it's personal. And that's the kind of thing that we're looking out for when we want to be able to have like a cooperative team environment. Okay, the kind of red flag that we were talking about before, as you could see, the candidate was a lot more arrogant and was talking about how they're better than everyone else. And that's the kind of stuff that we try to avoid. If this is a game programming interview, this is maybe a generic kind of question that you might be asked. Let's start with this one. Can you describe to me what an enumerator is and when would you use one? And also, are there any alternatives to enumerators that you would use in certain situations? Enumerator. Well, a enumerator is this like data structure that you would use to kind of iterate through like a deterministic algorithm so that you can like encapsulate like functional paradigms, and there's not really like a lot of alternatives to it, so that's what an enumerator is. Ooh, two big and separate issues with that response. First of all, you didn't know something very fundamental to what I would expect a game programmer to know. Second of all, you just totally made up a bunch of stuff. If you don't know the answer, the interviewer is going to know you don't know the answer, okay? So you should just admit that you don't know the answer. Practice on ways of admitting that if you need to, or some kind of variation of that. All right, so next technical question. Can you go ahead and go up to the whiteboard and demonstrate the use of a cross product in game programming? Okay, cross product. I'm really, really embarrassed to confess this, but I don't remember off the top of my head the formula that I would use to calculate a cross product. Just that when I use cross products in my game programming, it's usually to calculate the surface normal of like a plane or other kind of surface in 3D space, and that's how I would use cross product. So I'd probably look up again the formula for calculating the cross product to be able to do some similar operation. Ooh, this is good. If you don't know the answer to a question and the answer is easily Googleable, it's not like a very specific concept related thing, it's just like a formula that you could look up, then in the most humble way possible, in my opinion, it's totally fine to just say that you don't know and that this is something that you would look up, and then go ahead and explain how you would use that formula or how you would use that Googleable knowledge. Of course, if the job is specific enough or niche enough, then there's some easily Googleable knowledge that is just expected that you know. And so saying you don't know, while it's better than just making stuff up, is still probably going to hurt you. Now, I'm talking to you interviewers out there. Try not to put the candidate in this position. If you want them to explain something, try to keep it more abstract, keep it more concepts related. And if there's really something that you want them to apply and you want to evaluate them on their ability to apply something, then put them in like a separate room, in a private room, give them a problem to solve, come back later, have a conversation about it, because that's, you know, going to be more representative of the work environment in the future, right? Ooh, this kind of red flag. Consider an example where the candidate comes to a situation where they start creating an open curly brace. And imagine they said this.
Curly braces on the next line because we're not monsters. .NET has standards.
Ooh, I'm sure that person's a great programmer, but if this happened in a job interview, I would consider that to be a pretty big red flag. And this kind of fanboyism is what I call pushy preferences. It's where someone has some kind of opinion or preference, and they're presenting it as if it's like a fact or a standard or something like that. And this kind of thing is something that I feel leads to poor team cohesion. In the case of the curly braces, really you're just going to use whatever your company is using, whatever the team is using to stay consistent. And while maybe someone with pushy preferences will be able to be quiet, but if it's kind of part of their personality to have this kind of fanboyism, then it's probably not going to end there, right? So, and just as an aside, the famous manifesto of style preferences, PEP 8 for Python, would never consider itself to be a standard because it's not. It's just a style guide. So anyways, is that a Razer laptop? Oh man, Razer's the bomb. Razer for life. You know, I don't know why so many people are so gullible to buy overpriced junk like Apple, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, I'm not flattered. Not only are there probably going to be team members who have Apple devices, but even if they didn't, this is certainly not the culture that I want to set. Hi, thanks for inviting me to this interview. I'm really excited to be here. I really look forward to checking out the company. See, religious identity and political affiliation is not fanboyism, okay? And it's not a red flag, particularly if it comes up organically, like maybe cross earrings, or maybe on the lunch break, the candidate wants to go pray or something like that. Or maybe even it comes up in the interview itself, maybe when you're asking about leadership experience and they talk about something about, you know, their leadership experience with like some kind of political party type of thing, you know, how they're running the show, or maybe at their congregation or something like that. And that's totally fine. I would consider it more of a problem if, you know, they come in about it really pushy, like maybe they're wearing like a campaign shirt to the interview or something like that. Then I'll be like, okay, now we're running into a similar problem as we did with fanboyism. Wait, proselytizing is a kind of fanboyism? Does that mean that political parties are a religion? Okay, but seriously, there's one more scenario that I want to point out. Hey, all right, check out this perk. We've got craft beer Fridays in the office. What's your brew? Sorry, but I don't drink. Is that gonna be a problem? Oh, yeah. Of course, you know, like that's fine. Okay, this time the interviewer was making the red flag to the candidate. And before you come off saying, oh, well, they weren't going to fit in anyways, or something like that, I want us to take a step back. Okay, so culture fit is something that's kind of a dicey subject in the industry, and I want to address it. So when we talk about culture fit with respect to teams, in my opinion, I think we should be looking out for personality, we should be looking out for temperament and how well they would fit into a team, and we shouldn't be looking for things like their religious identity or other things that might be affected by someone's personal or religious convictions, especially in contentious kinds of topics such as alcohol. We should probably just keep that stuff out of the workplace or out of the workplace expectation, because otherwise you're really going to be alienating a lot of otherwise rock star employees, and we really want to kind of solve that problem. If you're going to be trying to bringing into the work environment some kind of team building type of thing or exercise or something to bond over, why don't you stick to something that you can more reliably expect employees to share in common? Like, for example, in game development, I don't know, bond over games or something? Okay, this is one of the hardest types of red flags to identify. And the reason for that is because candidates know it's a red flag. They know when they're really committing that red flag, and it's pretty easy to fake. So there's some obvious stuff like showing up late for the interview, or, you know, not responding very quickly to communication or something like that. But what else is there? Hey, so it's cool. You got a lot of side projects, but I noticed while reviewing your application materials that most of these side projects have really nothing to do with the field of this particular position, this role. Can you talk a little bit about your side projects and talk a little bit about that? Yeah, I kind of passively applied for this job, actually. Gotta pay the bills while I look for the job that I actually want. Okay, yeah, sorry, interviewers. It's probably not going to be that easy. Detecting enthusiasm in the candidate is something you sometimes have to kind of read between the lines, or there's some kinds of questions that you can use to attempt to fish it out. So, what kind of sites or publications do you like to use or do you frequent in order to get caught up and stay up with the field? Sites and stuff? Um, It's tricky. I guess there's this one YouTube channel that I would watch. The name's kind of escaping me right now. I admit it, I'm not really up to date on a lot of the game development news. It's not really what I've been looking at. See, when someone's passionate about a field, they're usually keeping up on it. Okay, they might be doing side projects, so you could, as an interviewer, you might be able to ask about side projects. But even so, if a candidate does not respond the way you were hoping to this kind of question, I still consider it to be a yellow flag at best, or at worst. Anyway, sometimes people just don't have the time to keep up with this type of thing outside of work. In fact, the more experience that they have, it's possible just the more they have going on. And so to write them off as a bad potential employee just because they aren't keeping up with the current news is not necessarily the wisest plan. And so when I am looking for like enthusiasm, I'm mostly just kind of taking all these different types of little signals here and there throughout the interview to see if they have any real interest in the position. In an ideal world, the candidate and the employer, the interviewer, are equally as excited about the candidate being hired. Now, it usually plays out that the interviewer is not used to being the one more excited, so keep that in mind if you're a candidate. But even if you're kind of like in a bad mood or something's going on, you're going through a tough time in your life, and that kind of affects your mood, it can be difficult to go through the interview with full smiles and enthusiasm. And if that's the case and it's impossible for you to be able to hide that, then it's not the ideal play, but it could help to just kind of let the interviewer know. It's kind of awkward, but if you let them know that you're kind of going through a tough time in your life right now, they can potentially be understanding and certainly, hopefully, not just write you off as someone who just doesn't care about this job. Well, those were my top 5 red flags I look out for in an interview. This video is a little bit different than the other content on this channel, so leave a comment if you want to see more of this type of content. Otherwise, like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video.